Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You joined me live in a session and I want to talk about a particular rig that has been doing exceptional for me this last couple of years, and it's the weighted hook. Now, I've not reinvented the wheel here, and you bright sparks out there who will say, well, that's been around for a long while, Holmes. You're probably right. The weighted hook in various forms has been around for quite a while. I originally came across this in a strange conception about 25 years ago, and it was a long shank hook that had fuse wire wrapped around the shank. But this is the version that I've been using. I'm talking now about the mechanics of the rig, and then we're going to have a little section where we actually show how I make the rig up. But there's a couple of points which are really apparent to me that I need to make first of all. The first one is the size of the rig ring. I use a large rig ring, not a small rig ring. Now, I like a large rig ring, and the reason for that is because the freedom of movement that you get with the increased size of the ring means that if you are fishing in amongst weeds, and those of you who follow my fishing will know I do like to fish sometimes in weed or very close to weed. I prefer to keep away from sort of clean gravel hard bottoms. So if you've got a little bit of chod on the bottom, if there's a little bit of silkweed about, then if you use a very small ring, there's a chance that it can get clogged up. The larger ring gives far more freedom and access of movement. So that's the first thing that you can see. The second thing which is important is actually to have where the wire is there at the bottom of the rig, you can see it protrudes out and the line comes along like that. Well, that's simply because when you catch a fish with this, the actual force of you pulling against it, the loop there gets pulled down to the end of the tubing. So as you play in your fish, your hook hold is nice and neat, but the actual line is being pulled against it. So that loop that causes the freedom of movement is actually back tight against the tubing. Now, because the lead wire sits in the shrink tubing so tight, if you aren't able to access and pull that out, then you can't pull the loop back. So to go through it, that is basically a size 4 KD curved hook, and it's got lead wire. Now, lead wire is difficult to come by, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. And you've got shrink tubing and you've got a pop-up. But what I like about this, you can vary the size of the wire, you can vary the size of the hook, so that you don't need to put any weight or puttee or split shot to have an anchor point for your pop-up. That is so critically balanced that the lead wire that's in that actually goes down and sits as a counterweight for the pop-up. So there's no need for additional weights. Now, what I like about this is that, as with most hook setups, you're actually looking for that to drop down into the fish's mouth. And because it is weighted, once that goes into the fish's mouth, it drops down, and it's something that they're not used to coming across at the moment. You can see you can also change the shape of the hook to be aggressive and close down the gape. Just simply by, and I'll do it here, can you see how simply changing the shape of the lead wire can change the actual gape of the hook and makes it very difficult for the carp to deal with. And what I'd like to do now is quickly go through each individual component product needed to tie the weighted hook rig. The first thing is the jelly wire. Now, we do various breaking strains of this. We do 25 and 35, and it covers all of the sort of bog standard gravel, silt and weed. But because I fish weedy waters up and down the country, I stick to the 35 weed. Makes no odds to me 25 to 35. So if I've got a choice between £10 extra breaking strain, I'll go for that. So that's going to be the base of the trace. Then, as I've mentioned, put in there the rig rings. So we have a large rig ring, and of course I've already spoken about the reason why I like the large rig ring, so that you don't get any obstruction, and it just eases the mobility of the bait to go up and down on the loop far easier. Then we've got, which I think is important, these little thread needle threaders. Now I use that when you actually see how we tie the rig. Sometimes with a hook, getting a loop that's already been tied through the eye hook can be a little bit difficult. These, and you'll see when we do them, make it very much easier to just pull it through. Different sizes of lead wire dependent upon the size of pop-up that I'm going to use and need to anchor. This is the hardest component to find. Bog standard shrink tubing, and of course the thing about shrink tubing is you need to make sure that there is enough room when this is shrunken down for it to all tight onto the shank of the hook, but still have enough movement so you can take the lead wire in and out in order to pull the loop down. And of course, very importantly, what type of hook pattern do I use? Well, I used the curved KDs. I had originally used this with a power curve, but I've found that the pattern that I think sits the best after much trial and error over the years is the PB curved KD. And I like the big sizes, so I've gone for a size 4. Obviously we do these in various sizes, but 4 again assists the weight of the hook so that you can use something like a 15-16mm pop-up and have no problem in anchoring it. Right, so let's get on with tying it. Now the amount of jelly wire that I take is about, I don't know, about 14 inch. So just trap it there, cut it off. Then the next thing is stripping back the coating. Now I normally strip back about, what's that, 4 or 5 inches. So in it goes, nicely stripped back. And there you can see we've stripped back about 4 inch. So simple as it is, I'm going to take my glasses off for this, because I can see better with my glasses off for this. We tie a simple overhand loop. And there we go, that's the loop tied. So here's the clever part. We take the curved KD hook, and this is the splicer, thread splicer, so that actually I put through the eye of the hook. And the reason why I do that is because I've already tied the loop, it can be a little bit tight for the eye, but by simply pulling it through with the threader, job's done. So now what I need to do is put the large rig ring on and just simply loop over the hook so it's in position, pull him down. And I normally for this start, obviously we're going to have the close-ups, but I like it to just sit just before it starts to move into the curve at the bottom of the shank. So that's where it sits. So now we're going to go to the shrink tube. And again, the important part of the shrink tube is to make sure that you have shrink tube which, when it's shrunk, still has enough room to move your lead wire out. So I'll put about, I don't know, about an inch, just over an inch of shrink tubing. Take my glasses off again, thread it down, and now we start to put it onto the hook. So you can see already how it's starting to take form. What I want to do is just quickly cut off that tag end to make it nice and neat. There we go. Great, them cutters. And now we need to think about lead wire. So I'll put that there for now, and we'll look at the various lead wire. Now this is the lead wire that I've chosen, and remember the important part about the lead wire is to actually oversize it, because you want a bottom part of it protruding out of the tubing. So we'll cut it to there, and then what we do then, I'll take my glasses off again, is we're going to slide this into, you can see that the lead wire is actually protruding about 1 centimetre. I don't want it that big, so I'll just trim that off to about there. So it's just sticking out there. And so that's the hook, that's the tubing, there's the lead wire sticking out the bottom. So all that's left now is to shrink it down. Now of course what we do need is we need an anti-tangle sleeve, and I use the small anti-tangle sleeve. So if we thread, come on Mark, there we go, we thread that up, and I'm looking to make it about 10 inch. So because I'm using a small anti-sleeve, what I do is I tie a small loop. So you can see there, it's only a small loop, so we trim that off, and again with any loop you make sure that you don't do it flush to the knot. There we go, you leave a little bit of a tag end showing so it makes sure that it doesn't slip. And now what we do is we neatly plug it in there, put it in. So all we've got to do now is make sure that the lead's protruding there. I'm holding the rig ring that's in place. There's manoeuvre, it's got loads of room to go up and down, manoeuvrability is good. And so all we need to do now is to shrink the tubing down so it fits nice and snug. Right, so there's the finished rig. I've tied my bait on. The weight inside the shrink tubing counterbalances the pop-up, so it sits and sinks really slowly. So let's get it cast out and let's catch a big carp.